Emerging and developing economies of Central Asia will grow 3.6% this year. According to the latest edition of the World Bank's Economic Update, recovery in exports and stabilizing in industrial commodity prices will help offset the recent flare-up in new cases of COVID-19. To help better understand where our economies stand, the regional director for the Central Asian region of the World Bank, Ms. Lilia Burunchuk, has agreed to meet with me for this episode of Impactful. Ms. Burunchuk, welcome.
Thank you.
Amid the pandemic, the Central Asian region has experienced an economic contraction not seen in 25 years, not since the global financial crisis of 2008, not even since the financial crisis in Russia in 1998, and not even during the staggering plunge of oil prices in 2015. And for most people who are over 30 years old, living in a post-Soviet country, the idea of going back and reliving the economic conditions of the early or mid-90s is a scary thought. So what does this economic contraction really imply and represent for the region?
Well, this is indeed, as you said, a very significant shock to the economies of Central Asia, and the economies of Central Asia have been growing quite rapidly during the last 25 years, and this is the first time when the overall Central Asia economy has contracted. This implies that there has been a significant impact on economic activity, on jobs. There has been a significant impact on increasing poverty for people. For example, in Kazakhstan, the economy contracted by 2.6% last year, and in Kyrgyzstan, the economy contracted even more. This is one of the most affected countries in Central Asia, with a contraction over 8% of GDP, which is very significant. Two countries in Central Asia are among the very few countries in the world that did not see a contraction, but they still had a very slow economic growth, much slower than they had before the pandemic. This is Uzbekistan and Tajikistan.
Now, what is the scale of the long-term effects of this economic contraction in the region?
One very important impact of the pandemic is actually the impact on the human capital. We've estimated that the impact from the learning losses, from the skills and knowledge losses in Central Asia can reach about $44 billion. This is a significant amount and a significant shock for actually loss for the economies of Central Asia going forward, in particular because more than half of the Central Asian population are youth. And this is the future of the country, and if the future human capital of the country is not getting the learning outcomes and is not getting the skills and knowledge that is needed for them to be productive in the future, the economy stands to lose.
And since you started talking about human capital, the World Bank's Human Capital Development Index and report came out in 2020. And according to it, a child born in Central Asia reaches 50 to 63% of its human capital. And that is below average. Will there be a significant decrease even for this quite low indicator?
Countries, of course, the human capital index for countries in Central Asia is not where we would like it to see, and it actually has been declining. But Central Asia, when you compare Central Asian countries with their peers in the same income group, are still not doing bad. And what I think is important is to not lose the focus on human capital, which means invest more resources, budget resources on education, invest more in health.
And women especially do not reach their full human development potential in Central Asia, even pre-pandemic. Where measured, the gender pay gap has been 30% for over a decade. How will that situation change? Do you think the pandemic will roll back the years of some progress made in gender equality?
I would actually say that Central Asia has not been making a lot of progress on gender equality. In some countries, we actually even see some reverse trends in terms of gender equality in Central Asia, which is very concerning, and this was even pre-pandemic. And during the pandemic, what we've observed, not only in Central Asia, worldwide, that it is women who have suffered the most. They lost more jobs. Women-headed households are more affected in terms of the income and poverty level. In terms of SMEs and informal businesses led by women, they were also suffered more because women partially had more probably responsibilities to take care of the household, to take care of children who were now at home instead of being in school, and also caring for the elderly.
We've started talking about Kyrgyzstan, how it has been hit by the crisis. We also went over Tajikistan, and these two countries are the world's most remittance-reliant economies. How are they faring currently?
Initially, when the pandemic started, our estimates for the drop in remittances were much higher. Remittances did drop, but they did not drop as dramatically as we thought. Actually, this is one of the reasons that explains why GDP of Tajikistan hasn't dropped as much as we initially feared. Still, with the declined remittances, many households lost their incomes. Many households are struggling today to put food on the table. In countries like Kyrgyzstan, 60% of the population is vulnerable, and the poverty rate has almost doubled in the Kyrgyz Republic. So the effect of decline in remittances is still quite significant on these countries.
Now, the World Bank has estimated another 1.4 to 1.9 million people falling into poverty during the pandemic, and because of the crisis caused by the pandemic. The Central Asia will account for 60% of the new poor of the entire Europe and Central Asian region. And these are absolutely saddening and tragic developments. And amidst all of that, what type of assistance is the World Bank providing in these countries as part of its investment and crisis relief programs?
Let me start with actually a point that I would like to make, because yes, indeed, the poverty numbers have increased. And what is important for the governments in this situation is to significantly improve the programs that support unemployment and provide social protection and social assistance to the needy. This pandemic has shown that these systems are still not adequate, and there is a big priority, big need in Central Asia, in all countries in Central Asia, to strengthen these systems. And the World Bank has been providing assistance to countries in Central Asia to strengthen this system. We have an ongoing project in Uzbekistan. We have programs ongoing in Kyrgyzstan, and also we had a project that was recently completed in Tajikistan, but we also provided emergency support in these three countries, and the emergency support that we provided in these countries all included, in addition to health measures to protect the poor, social protection measures, so that countries can provide more immediate emergency support to those who really need it.
Ms. Brunchuk, let's talk about Kazakhstan for a moment. The number of COVID-19 cases are still growing and the economic activity is still depressed. Reduced commodity demands in the world and reduced commodity prices, reduced trade have all hit the economy of Kazakhstan, where 2/3 of all exports account for shipments of petroleum, natural gas, gold and metals. Production at the giant oil field Tengiz fell 12% last year in accordance with the OPEC Plus agreements. If the economy is to pick up this year, where do you see the growth coming from?
We just released, as I said, the numbers for economies in Central Asia, our projections for this year, and our estimates is that Kazakhstan will grow somewhere between 3 and 4%. And this will be mainly supported by restored incomes by people and by consumption. Also by people investing more in housing and construction, the investment, also the investments that the government is planning in its sectors, including service sectors, but also in infrastructure going forward. But what is important for a country like Kazakhstan to reach higher rates of growth going forward and to reach its actually goal to join sometime soon the rank of developed economies, high-income economies in the world, is to actually finish the unfinished agenda of transitioning the economy from a state-dominated economy with the domination of state-owned or quasi-state-owned enterprises to a private-led economy, to create more space for the private sector to be able to invest, to be able to create jobs, to create well-paid jobs, and to attract investment and to help the country to grow.
And these are World Bank recommendations as to what Kazakhstan should do. How responsive are the government officials to these recommendations?
So actually our recommendations are much larger, I would say. Now, in the short term, our recommendation is get people vaccinated as soon as possible. Continue to focus on health and education and on actually building human capital to minimize the loss of human capital and continue building the human capital, because that's the future. And strengthen the social protection system so that it can protect the vulnerable from the suffering. As we discussed, the poverty rates have increased throughout Central Asia, and they have increased in Kazakhstan as well. And then invest in the economy, create a space for the development of small and medium enterprises. Maybe redesign the inefficient schemes and programs, and put in place programs that will really get the results in terms of small and medium enterprises to create jobs, but also to grow and become big and become big employers and become exporters. Also, what is really important is to create a level playing field. So this is going more to the fundamentals in terms of improving competition, in terms of making sure that there is less corruption, to make sure that procurement is transparent and competitive, that there is a functioning rule of law. These are all things that are prerequisites for a country to be as successful as the countries in the high-income group.
Now let's talk about what the government has done to relieve, some of the impacts of the economic pressure that has been building on people. Many argue that the government cash relief measures and also business support measures have been inadequate, have not been enough. What is your stance on that?
Yeah. In fact, when you compare Kazakhstan with other countries in Central Asia, and actually many other countries in the world, Kazakhstan has spent a significant amount of money on supporting people and supporting businesses during this period. You may argue that it may not have been as much as maybe big developing countries like the US have provided, or developed countries in Europe have provided, but compared to countries at Kazakhstan's income group, its assistance was quite adequate. What is important now is really to accelerate job creation, to accelerate the return of the economy to its normal stance. And actually, the priority number one is to accelerate vaccination, because this is what will allow the country to get back to a normal state, or new normal state, and will allow new businesses to start to appear, ongoing businesses to revive their activities, and for people to start getting jobs and improving their incomes.
Ms. Burunchuk, in Central Asia, governments historically play a major and critical role in shaping economies, and good governance is all the more important in a crisis like this. The World Bank has recently published a report on data, digitalization and governance in Europe and Central Asia, and it looks into how much data and digitalization can help improve governance. How can data and digital revolution offer the potential to increase the efficiency of our governments?
I would like to really emphasize that this pandemic has shown that governments that are effective, governments that have the trust of their citizens, have actually done better during the pandemic. And being open, being actually having trustworthy policies and a transparent way of governing the country and doing business is one of the ingredients of success. And this pandemic has shown how important is the digital development. And it has shown that Central Asia still has to do a lot. Kazakhstan is doing much better than other countries in Central Asia, but still can do much better in terms of creating an environment for the telecom sector to enable a digital economy that would be equitable, not only in the big cities, even in the big cities where we've seen many problems, but countrywide.
You've just mentioned that the governments have done well in countries where there was a higher public trust in government. What are some specific examples?
Look at Australia, look at New Zealand. These countries have done really well during the pandemic, and then it is a big factor was the trust in government and the way the government acted during this time.
Now, you've worked in the region for quite some years, and you know Central Asia very well. What is your hope for the region?
You know, I actually am very positive about the region. This region has a bright future. If it really gets its act together. This region is located to huge markets around it, just next door. Central Asia can export food, and not just food, but tasty food. This region can export renewable green energy, and it has great potential in exporting energy. This region has a lot to offer in terms of tourism. It is more than 1,000 ancient history and culture that will attract tourists, but also has beautiful landscapes in all countries, and the mountains and lakes. This region also has a young and growing population, and it should use this demographic dividend to achieve a better future for its people, for the people of Central Asia. And my last point is, actually, let me tell you a proverb. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you should go together. And this is what I would like to wish to see in the future in Central Asia, that if Central Asia goes together, Central Asia has much greater prospects to prosper in the future. So regional cooperation in Central Asia is very important.
And that's a beautiful final thought, Ms. Burunchuk. Thank you.
Thank you.